On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 in the Chernobyl nuclear power facility failed. Located in Pripyat, Ukraine, the reactor leaked radioactive fuel into Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. The reactor failed because there was a power surge, which caused a large spike in power. Workers tried to shut down the reactor, but this caused an even bigger power surge and the reactor exploded. This spread radioactive fuel into the atmosphere, which spread over Russia and parts of Europe. Although the immediate deaths only numbered 31, the prolonged deaths from radiation-related diseases vastly outnumbers this. Because of the poor healthcare system in the affected areas, even more deaths happened. The failure also could have been avoided prior to the surge. The workers that were in charge of the reactor during the failure were inexperienced and made poor decisions that led to the failure. Because of this catastrophic failure, laws and regulations on nuclear facilities in America were established, including laws for requirements for educated workers. Although nuclear power plants are now safer, they are still dangerous and the fear of these should be heightened, as Airmen and Westinghouse Electric planned to build modular nuclear reactors in the St. Louis area. After the failure of Chernobyl, many nations saw a need for safer nuclear energy with much less risks. Many laws and conventions were created to protect workers and civilians. A couple of these conventions were the Vienna Convention and the Convention on Early Notification. The Vienna Convention established about 7 major principles. These principles all had one focus in mind: to protect people and heavily penalize those people responsible for any nuclear damage. The Soviet Union failed to notify those exposed to harmful radiation, increasing the deaths and debilitating defects caused by the radiation. The Convention on Early Notification in 1986 made it so now that any state with radiation leakage is required to inform those affected by this radiation. The NRC was established in 1975. Its mission is to regulate the nation's civilian use of byproduct, source, and special nuclear materials to ensure adequate protection of public health and safety, to promote common defense and security, and to protect the environment. The NRC, like many other agencies after the Chernobyl incident, vastly improved its regulations and restrictions after the failure.
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is the NRC, and the NRC oversees, the use of radiation as far as reactors and medical uses and that type of thing. Then you have a whole host of other organizations that are involved. The National Council of Radiation Protection and Measurements, this group, they're generally formed to minimize radiation exposure to the public. So they look at policies and procedures, things like you were talking about. How would people be exposed, or would be notified if there was an exposure, or if there is an event, or if there's radiation exposure that occurs by any means.
And because of the NRC's efforts, these are the results.
power plants are extremely good because they're highly regulated.
Right.
You know, they're not going to, no one's going to be cutting any corners at a power plant, you know, and they're inspected regularly.
Well,
So
and people kind of have a bad taste in their mouth with what happened in Japan. But what happened in Japan was a natural disaster.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, you had your
yeah.
tsunami and then you have an earthquake. So it wasn't that they, I mean, they had everything in order for that reactor. It's just that everything they had in order was destroyed by, you know, natural disaster. So that made that just.
Ameren and Westinghouse Electric have become electric allies in Missouri and plan to build modular nuclear reactors.
Alliance between Westinghouse, the state of Missouri, Ameren, Missouri, and our electric energy providers truly has the potential to transform the production of electricity in Missouri, in America, and quite frankly, throughout the world. In doing so, this project could spark a new global industry right here in the Show Me State.
The question is, what will happen if we don't get the DOE funding? First of all, that's not going to happen. But will the project go forward? Westinghouse is committed to this SMR technology, and we absolutely need a utility partner to help us ensure that the design is fit not just for Missouri, but for the globe. And so our goal is to ensure that we do that in an economic way. Clearly, we'll have to think about what do we do now if that doesn't happen. But you know, this is a big business strategy for Westinghouse, to which we are completely committed.
Recently, Ameren and Westinghouse Electric united in an effort to build a new type of nuclear reactor in Missouri. These reactors are small and modular and are relatively cheap. American and Westinghouse competed with other companies to receive grants from the government to support the projects. Yet, Ameren and Westinghouse small modular reactors are falling in favor for being cheaper and easier to manage. Nixon says that projects don't get any bigger than this one. This project can spark a new global industry right here in the Show Me State. And there are many more. So it is not unreasonable to say that one of the country's leading states in nuclear power will probably end up with these reactors eventually. Yet this puts us in even more danger. Even though these reactors are safer, we still have risks. Like the Callaway plant, we still don't have a permanent solution for disposing of spent fuel rods. Increasing the amount of reactors would increase the amount of cooling pools needed, which greatly increases the risk of leaking radioactive fuel. Nixon talks about Missouri becoming a state housing multiple nuclear reactors. But what will be the cost? Is clean energy worth the risk to us? This is why the seemingly positive idea of having modular plants isn't worth the risk and should be stopped before it happens. If the Callaway plant or the future modular reactors were to leak fuel, the effects would be both harmful to the environment and to people.
What's going to happen is the hematopoietic, so that's the bone marrow. That's what's going to be affected first. That's usually at 5 gray, which is 100 rads, or 500 rads. 500 rads. The next one is going to be your gastrointestinal, and that can start anywhere from 10 rads or above. And then once you get to about 50 rads, then you can have a CNS syndrome, which is the central nervous system. But just remember that those things compound on each other. So if you have the thing is it has to be acute exposure. So it has to happen like this, all at one time.
whole body.
Whole bodies that you can see and appreciate, that's going to be the first thing.
And then you're going to have reddening of the skin, and then you're going to have necrosis of the skin, or you know, death of the tissue, and then you're going to actually see the skin eroding away.
Our environment would also be heavily affected. Like the areas affected after Chernobyl, our plants and animals would be heavily hit. Many plants would die from the radiation ruining the ecosystem. Also, the animals would be given a high dosage of radiation. If they would not suffer the consequences, their offspring have high risk for severe mutations. Our ecosystem might turn out like the one in the affected areas of Chernobyl. For example, the red forest was affected. The red forest was exposed to large amounts of radiation during the failure, and all of its trees died, turning them all to a reddish color and destroying the ecosystem. The mutations that occurred because of the radiation weren't from the animals exposed, but from their offspring. Some of these mutations include the two-headed turtle and the two-legged lizard. The Chernobyl incident was horrible and will never be forgotten. We are seeing more and more effects years later that were unpredictable. Some of these good, some bad. We have much more secure reactors that are very unlikely to explode. But we also have a false sense of security because they are still dangerous. While some think that nuclear reactors in urban areas is the way forward, we should be cautious so as to avoid another Chernobyl.